In 1453, a siege took place that finalized the collapse of a political entity that had survived for over 1,000 years. This was the final death rattle of the Roman Empire. This map illustrates the steady collapse of Byzantine borders. By the mid-15th century, a vast empire had retracted into a single geographical point, leaving the isolated city of Constantinople surrounded by a sea of Ottoman territory. The city survived this isolation because of a specific architectural barrier. These historic stone fortifications, the Theodosian Walls, were built in multiple reinforced layers that stretched across the entire peninsula. For centuries, these exact stones absorbed the concentrated assaults of Arab, Persian, and Crusader armies. Every advancing force found the defenses impenetrable. Whoever held this physical gateway controlled the route between east and west. For a millennium, these walls served as the fixed anchor of the ancient world. The Roman military doctrine seen in this relief evolved into a strategy of defense in depth. Facing constant border threats, the empire relied on fortified hardpoints to outlast long, punishing sieges. The engineering reflected this. Builders constructed exceptionally thick primary stone walls, protected by layered moats that neutralized the momentum of an infantry charge. Between the ditches and the walls sat wide, flat spaces known as berms. This distance was mathematically calculated to keep massive, rolling siege towers at a safe distance, preventing them from dropping their ramps onto the battlements. This reconstructed Roman ballista highlights the limits of ancient offensive technology. These siege engines relied entirely on mechanical tension and muscle power to generate force. Even traditional battering rams were practically useless here. The localized, low-velocity impacts they produced were easily absorbed by stone engineered to dissipate physical strikes. Under the rules of medieval warfare, physics favored the defender. If an attacking army could not starve a city into submission, these immovable walls guaranteed survival. When Sultan Mehmed II positioned his forces outside the city, he understood that traditional siege mechanics would fail. He needed to change the physics of the engagement. The solution had been moving west from China for centuries. Black powder provided a way to bypass mechanical tension and generate a new scale of kinetic force. An engineer named Orban scaled this chemical reaction up to industrial proportions. He cast a massive bronze weapon, creating a siege engine that dwarfed any weapon used in previous centuries. Feeding this engine required roughly hewn stone projectiles of staggering mass, like the ones shown here, designed to maximize physical trauma upon impact. Orban's design left the limitations of muscle and wood behind. It delivered a class of energy output that physically broke the established rules of ancient combat. A battering ram delivers slow, localized kinetic energy, but a cannonball strikes with rapid velocity, sending an expanding shockwave through the stone. These walls were never engineered for concussive force. Under repeated bombardment, deep cracks compound, compromising the structural integrity of the entire fortification. The Ottoman forces maintained this bombardment for 55 straight days. For the defenders, the terror grew as the walls that had protected their ancestors for 1,000 years began to dissolve into rubble. On May 29, 1453, the cumulative damage reached the breaking point. The core of the Theodosian Walls finally gave way. The breaching of the perimeter resulted in the catastrophic failure of an architectural philosophy that had stood since the Roman era. Ottoman forces poured through the rubble of the breach, overwhelming the final defenders of the city. This statue commemorates Constantine XI, the final Roman emperor, who fell in combat as his city collapsed. His death extinguished a continuous political entity that had governed parts of the Mediterranean since the time of the Caesars. As the dust settled over Constantinople, the last living political link to the ancient world was severed. The consequence across Europe was immediate. Stone castles and traditional fortresses, once the ultimate symbols of security, were rendered obsolete. Armies quickly abandoned tension-powered trebuchets and catapults, replacing them with firearms and mobile artillery. The shift was financial as much as tactical. Because these new gunpowder armies required massive industrial casting and constant supplies of black powder, only centralized monarchs had the wealth to field them. This crippled the independence of local feudal lords, whose stone castles could no longer offer protection from a king's artillery. Orban's giant cannon did more than breach a city wall. It dismantled the physical reality that had defined the medieval world for 5 centuries, replacing the security of stone with the dominance of industrial fire.